Hey guys, I'm Camron Stover from huntinggeardeals.com to talk about 3 whitetail rut locations that you should be hunting this season. It's no secret that deer like the it's no secret that most of the time when we're hunting during the rut, we're looking at pinch points, working at low gaps, areas that are going to condense deer travel, and that's increasing our odds. But there are also some unique features throughout the Midwest that you can focus on during the rut and find success. Some of these areas are off the beaten path, and some of them are the beaten path. So let's start with number 1, the path of least resistance. I can't tell you how many stands I've seen ruined in the whitetail woods from where I'm from in southern West Virginia because of a down tree. Sounds crazy, but our flats, our huntable areas are usually just a dozer blade wide. There's no natural flats in most of the areas of the cold country. So these old logging trails are what deer are moving on the most, and that's where I'm setting up shop to hunt. Usually that 3/4 of the way from the top. And one of my favorite stands from back in the day was ruined during the peak of the rut from a big tree top of an oak tree that fell down, and it completely sealed off this trail, and deer just avoided the area altogether because they couldn't easily get through that area. They chose to take the path of least resistance. Now, at that stage of my hunting career, was I able to adapt to that and find those deer? No, I just quit and I went to a different spot. But it showed me very quickly that deer aren't willing to work and put in the extra time to find that path to go around that tree. They're just willing to divert and go to a completely new direction if necessary. So understanding that, I've been able to take that path of least resistance thought process and apply that to hunting all across the country in areas where I can manipulate the habitat on the property. I can take and cut trails out during the off season and open it up for deer travel during the rut. For instance, I've got a property close to my house here that I was hunting into this. There's a big thicket on one side and open timber on the other. I'm right on that line because deer love to travel that edge line. I was also anticipating deer to come out of that timber, that big, thick bedding area. The problem was, as they entered and exited that, they weren't coming from the direction that I anticipated. They were taking the path of least resistance. They were going high or low. And especially if they wanted to go around it to get from one location to the next, instead of trying to dive in and go in through it, they would just circle around that bedding area and keep on traveling. So this was a lesson learned for me this year. So what I did was take a brush cutter and cleared a trail into this big, thick bedding area. And once I got into there, there was a nice little opening. So I took one area of condensed travel towards my stand, and then I opened it up into fingers, and I went left, right, middle, and I kept opening it up. So what I've done is condense that deer travel through that bedding area to one location to bring them right next to my stand. All right, our second place for hunting the rut during unusual locations other than the traditional low gaps and things like that and creek bottoms is a timber draw. Now, timber draws are kind of like a creek bottom, but what I'm talking about is this finger of timber extending up into fields, whether it be crops, whether it be CRP, and this small, narrow timber draw that we know that deer like to bed in. And that kind of goes against the grain of jumping in a bedding area because it's so hard to get in there. But what some of these bucks will do is cross from one finger draw or timber draw to the next and kind of hop over. Instead of traveling up and back down the other side, they're going to travel up, across the field, and back down as long as it's safe to do so. Now, they may travel the depression or something like that in that field, but the point of it is, don't be surprised by the amount of deer that will travel from one location to the next at the tip of those points. Not only will you have a great vantage point of the field and other areas, but you'll also be surprised at how many deer filter through there, especially when they're pressured. So if you've got an area to where you're sharing properties or your neighbor's property connects to this, even public ground, in some areas. This is a great small area to where deer will actually push up into there when they're pressured and then bust out when somebody actually but I'll give you an example of this season. I was actually doing some shed hunting. We were walking up this area of timber. The creek bottom was great, and there's these little points coming off of timber, these timber draws, and expecting to find sheds everywhere. I was amazed how many deer filtered out of one timber draw, run across the field to connect into another. And what those timber draws do is they provide cover, especially when they need it most, is when they're running away from predators. And during the rut, more hunters are in the woods. More hunters are putting pressure on properties at times of the year that they're never there. So don't be surprised that that timber draw that looks like the obvious bedding location is actually one of the best places to set up and hunt because you don't know what buck's showing up next. Now, here's the easiest one. It's the dead giveaway during the rut, but it's the inside corner of field edges. The problem is finding which inside corner of a field edge is best to set up on. And most of the time we choose this based off of wind direction, trying to ensure that a buck isn't going to catch our wind. And that's a strategy that you should continue to utilize. But also you need to fine tune these inside corners. And this can actually be done during the early season during your glassing and scouting process. Try to find areas, these inside corners, where it's being condensed down for the most likely traffic between location to location. It's not the field that you're focused on. It's not that food source during the rut. It's the area of travel. So keep that in mind this season as you're hunting the rut. Don't focus on the food. Focus on bucks traveling from one doe bedding location to another, and the path that they're projecting to take from point A to point B. Sometimes it's a timber draw to get them across the field as safely as possible from one side to the next. Another time, it may be the inside corner of a field edge where they're cutting that out. And I'll give you an example. When I was in Kansas this year, I was in the perfect inside corner in this little creek bottom in Kansas that was just ideal for buck travel. After my second or third day, full day of sitting in this stand, I watched another hunter on the bordering property get out of his stand and walk away. We were within 100 yards of each other, and I quickly found out why these deer were skirting me and bumping across the field inside the timber draw instead of going through the inside corner. Those inside corners are ideal locations for deer travel if deer are allowed to be deer and they're left alone. But what happens is hunters like you and I, we focus on those because they're easily to identify on a map and easy to get in and out of usually. So deer kind of learn that those are where the problem is. That's where people get shot if you go in there. So they stay away and they skirt the outside edges, they hit the timber draws, and they'll actually cut corners. And that's what the deer were doing on this particular property in Kansas. About 50 yards away from me, they were actually cutting the corner and going through the field. And it just seemed I was so oblivious to it at the time, but now it seems so obvious looking back why these deer were doing it. It was easy human pressure. So keep that in mind this season. Not only are you fighting a battle against a wild animal, but you're also fighting the battle against other humans. So think outside the box when it comes to the whitetail rut. Deer don't always take the most obvious trail because they're forced out of it. But if you allow deer to act like deer and you don't pressure them too much, they will take the path of least resistance, especially during the rut. So for more information, visit huntinggeardeals.com and don't forget to sign up for our daily deal email. So basically what Hunting Gear Deals does is we scour the web for discounted hunting products and put them in one convenient location. Maybe it's Cabela's, maybe it's Bass Pro, maybe it's Walmart or Amazon or Blocker Outdoors. Heck, KUIU could be having a sale coming up. We will let you know what's coming down the pipe and help you save money on hunting gear. So make sure you sign up for the daily deal email so you never miss a deal.